My name is Diane Laura Marsh, and then I got married and I added Simmons to it. I was born in January of 1953, and that was in Warwick, Rhode Island. Graduated from Pilgrim High School, went on to Rhode Island College where I got my undergraduate degree. I'm a youth services librarian. I have a wonderful family. I love my dogs and my kids. And my husband.
I'm George Simmons. I met this lovely woman next to me here, summer of 1970, just after I completed my freshman year at Rhode Island College, and I actually made my first trip up to Rangeley, Maine to visit the original camp in summer of 1971.
We are in Rangeley, Maine, and we're right now sitting in our cabin on Gull Pond, and I've been coming up since 1955, but prior to my coming up, my father had been coming up since he was a child. My father's uncle and aunt built a place up here on the pond, but it's next door, it's west from here, and that was called Tigermore Lodge, and that was where I first started coming when I was a child. My aunt and uncle built the place in 1926. My father spent every summer here growing up. And then after he married and started his family, I started coming up.
Probably within the first year, I'm sure she probably told me some of the stories. Of course, I tend to rationalize just about everything, and never really gave them a lot of credibility.
My mother had many experiences in her lifetime that she used to tell my sister and I about, and our friends, and we'd all get kind of spooked about it. But also on my father's side, his mother seemed to have a lot of paranormal experiences. She'd had a very scary story at one point that she used to like to tell us. Her mother had died when she was 101 years old. One of her rituals was she used to go upstairs every night and she would get ready for bed, and she had long hair, and in those days older ladies would put their hair up, and so she would go upstairs and she'd sit in front of a bureau and she would brush her hair like they used to say 100 times. Then she'd get ready for bed. But anyway, she passed away, and my grandmother was very involved in a lot of groups and associations, and like the DAR, and sometimes they would have conventions in Providence. So she would be willing to put up ladies from other parts of the country that needed some place to stay. So one time she had a lady arrive at her house, and she told the lady to go upstairs, and she said, "There's a bedroom up at the top of the stairs, go in, make yourself comfortable, and then come down, I'll make us some tea." And so the lady went upstairs and then came right back down, and she said, "I'm not sure if I got the room right, because there was an older lady and she had this long hair, and she was just sitting there brushing it, and what room am I supposed to go to?" And my grandmother right away knew it was her mother. And she just, went right upstairs, and when she got there was nobody there. And this woman knew nothing of my great-grandmother, nothing of her habits, and yet described her perfectly to my grandmother. My mother used to see spirits. She has many stories that she would tell us of seeing people that were like transparent. You could see through them, and they had that ghostish look. And she's got lots of stories like that of relatives that have passed that she saw at different times in her life. On this property, they weren't sure what they were going to do, and she was thinking they were going to sell the place over there.
Yes.
And keep the small cabin. Things started happening, like lights going off and just different things. But you could explain those by saying, okay, it was a short and a wire or something. But she and my father were in bed one night, and she opened her eyes, and she said she saw Mildred and Earl, and they were up against the wall, and they just kept coming closer and closer and closer and closer, until they were like right beside the bed, and she was like so scared. We had 2 small bedrooms side by side. They'd had trouble sleeping, and he had got up and decided to go into the other room, and she just screamed, you know, Brett, come here. And my father jumped out of bed and came running in, and she said it looked like he walked right through the ghosts, but he got right to her, and he was like, what's the matter? And he put the light on, and she felt they were more or less, I don't want to say threatening her, but letting her know that they were very displeased about the sale of the other house. So, and in the end, of course, it wasn't sold, so. My experiences have been more just things that have happened that I could not explain in any other way, except that it had to have been some type of paranormal experience, something going on.
Any story that she told me, I could always come up with a rational explanation. Basically, when her mother was seeing things, her mother was just dreaming, imagining things, waking up from a dream. I could rationalize just about anything that she told me, come up with a rational explanation. I think I tended to be very logic in nature, and I could always come up with a reason that kind of disproved what I thought would be paranormal.
My father had died in 1997, and we started bringing my mother up with us when we came. It was just a typical day, and we went to bed, and the bedroom situation was such that my mom always had her own room, and the room that we usually used was not very large, and so I ended up sleeping there with the 2 dogs, and George was sleeping downstairs on a couch, a fold-out couch, and there's a balcony, so like when we were sleeping, if I had the door open, I could get out of bed and look over the balcony and see him.
I woke up. I heard what is difficult to describe now because it's been so long ago, but I heard music, but it was more of I would describe it as a choir of voices, sounded something like something you would hear in church. And I had been sound asleep, and I kind of sat up, and I first thought I was just kind of like just waking up. I heard this music. About that time, the dogs started barking, and they were upstairs in the bedroom with Diane. This probably went on for a couple of minutes, and once the dogs started barking, it just stopped.
It was like a zipper. It just stopped.
Stop.
It wasn't like a fade away, it was just stopped.
Definitely wasn't coming from outside.
It got louder. It sounded like...
Kind of rose to a crescendo.
I can't sing, but
no.
I mean, but it kept getting higher and higher,
right,
and higher and louder and louder and louder until it sounded like it filled the entire house.
She said, George, did you hear that?
And it was
and
like
I said,
we were both,
yeah.
It was just
so what was it?
Unbelievable.
I said, I don't know. And neither one of us would get out of the bed to check on the other one. I stayed right where I was. You stayed right where you were.
My mom was asleep in the next room, and she always slept with her door shut, and there was no sound coming from her room, and I honestly thought my mom had died. And I thought that that was the angels, because it sounded so angelic and beautiful. I thought the angels had come for her, and I really thought we had somehow been witness to her passing, and that they had come, they had taken her soul and gone. And I really thought when we finally got brave enough to go and check on her, I really thought she would have passed. That's what my thought was.
Neither one of us got out of bed that night, and neither one of us said another word after that.
We got up, and I was too scared to open the door to where my mom was sleeping. And then finally at one point, we heard my mom getting out of bed. And so she hadn't passed. It wasn't the angels coming for her. So then we were like, what was this? What was this all about?
And we took a walk the next morning down to the farm on Gull Pond Road. And I think it was just the two of us, probably with the dogs. And I remember, I'm not sure if I said this to you or you said it to me, like, so what do you think that was last night?
It was like, we were like in shock, I think.
I don't know.
You didn't know what to
Could not explain it.
You know? I've talked to different people. Some people say that there are certain times, like if we could have remembered the actual date of this, I should have written it down and then done some research, because they say sometimes if it had been the anniversary of a specific event that occurred in the past, sometimes they say that will bring out spirits and angels if it's commemorating something. I've also read that sometimes there's a port where over a home there may be a port to heaven. And I've often wondered, because even growing up, my sister and I used to hear noises in that house that didn't sound like everyday noises. We used to always make a joke of it, but we always used to say we believed Uncle Earl was there. And so, I don't know. I even wondered if it was my father, that he had stayed with my mother for a few years and then realized that she's going to be okay now, and he was ascending to heaven, and the angels had come for him, for his soul that had remained on earth. You know, we've just puzzled so many things. But George was never a believer in the afterlife.
That's true.
And after this, he said he's just not sure.
I could not explain
Because
that. Could not rationalize it. What I heard,
it was not of this.
I have absolutely no explanation. So I'm not sure what I believe in, but I know that there is definitely something that can't be explained. Another thing is, after that, we always made sure we left the light on before we went to bed at night, and I would never in my life spend the night alone in that camp. Yeah. This is the first time I'm in my life that said, I can't explain it. There's something out there that's larger than life, something that I was never aware of but does exist. So I'm not sure exactly how much I do believe now, but I know there's something beyond what we mortally know.
I mean, it was frightening because we didn't know what it was, but it was a beautiful experience. Yes, it really was.
There was nothing threatening. It was a very melodic, very beautiful sound, but it's just not something you expect to hear in the middle of the night, unexpectedly, and for that reason it was totally frightening. I never believed in any afterlife. I tended to believe that most of these stories were from people that were slightly unbalanced, but not you, of course. That's pretty much it. I just didn't believe.
I really think that we were witness to something really beautiful and special, and maybe someday we'll find out what it was.